sailor's way. We crossed the line and the Gulf Stream, down by Table Bay. Around Cape Horn and home again, for that is the sailor's way. We crossed the line and the Gulf Stream, down by Table Bay. Around Cape Horn and home again, for that is the sailor's way. Bounding along in the southeast trades on a clear and starry night, we gather on the forecastle head and talk of home's delight. We talk of Sue and Sally, we talk of Sister May. Around Cape Horn and home again, for that is the sailor's way. We cross the line and the Gulf Stream, around by Table Bay. Around Cape Horn and home again, for that is the sailor's way. We cross the line and the Gulf Stream, down by Table Bay. Around Cape Horn and home again, for that is the sailor's way. You know, I was born in Glasgow, you know, Scotland, and like the majority of British youngsters there was always a great desire upon their part to go to sea. And I had that desire, so I went about it in the best way I could to be able to do so. And I happened to be working after I left school. I left school at 14, and I happened to be working as a messenger boy for the British telegraphs, you know.
Why did you leave school?
14.
And why? Because of...
Well, we left because you couldn't leave school. You couldn't leave school before you were 14. It was compulsory education up to 14. After that, you were on your own, unless your parents could afford to send you to high school, which meant payments and necessarily, if you come from a big family like I did, the sooner you get out of school the better, because you became more or less a bit of a breadwinner, you know. You had to contribute to the family. And one of my jobs, as I said, was delivering telegrams. And I used to go delivering telegrams to shipping offices in Glasgow, which is a great seaport. And all those shipping offices had models of ships on exhibit, you know, and I used to admire them too, and had a great desire to go to sea. So I got acquainted with one of the owners of these ships, you know, through the telephone. I told him what I would like to do. So he arranged it that I should go as an apprentice in one of his ships. Now, an apprentice on a British sailing ship was ostensibly there to learn the trade as a seaman, the profession as a seaman, and to fill the requirements for officers. And they were usually recruited from the middle class. The parents of these children that went to sea had to pay for indentures. It used to run about anywhere from 25 guineas to 50 guineas for the 4-year training course. And your parents paid that to have them, but I fortunately didn't have to do that through my acquaintance with the owner, you know. And
you just met him as a
messenger boy. A messenger boy, and I was a very curious youngster, you know. I was always talking, talk to anybody who would be willing to talk to me, you know. And he must have taken a liking to me, because he was willing to forego the apprenticeship fee. And he arranged, as I said, he arranged to go on this ship. And I joined the ship in Hamburg. And it was a big four-masted bark. It was bound for Australia.
What did your parents say of this?
Well, my parents were all for it. I mean, there was no one put anything in my way. I guess they were figuring, well, it'd be one less mouth to feed, or at least I would be learning something. And it was quite an honourable profession, especially to be an apprentice, because as I said, the British Shipping Company recruited all the officers from apprentices. Now, you didn't really have to be an apprentice to become an officer. If you joined the ship as a boy, as an ordinary seaman, and as long as you served 4 years, you could make application for your license as a mate and get yourself a job if you could. Of course, it was a strike against you not to have been an apprentice, you see, because there was a sort of class distinction involved here. And I remember that they always used to allude to a seaman who became an officer and was not an apprentice as having come through the horse hole, through the horse pipe. You know, he came through the horse pipe.
So you joined your first ship in Hamburg?
I joined the first ship in Hamburg. And it was very funny. You had a uniform to wear. You know, you wore a uniform like a minor officer with the double brass buttons, you know, and a typical peak cap, you know, that the officers wear in the British Merchant Marine. And in fact, that even gave rise to a nickname for the apprentices, who were called brass bounders. Brass bounders, you know. So I joined, as I said, I joined the ship in Hamburg.
And how old were you then?
I was 15, just turned 15, yeah, I just turned 15.
And how did you feel about going
on
the
I thought
ship?
it was great excitement, you know, with me, especially before I left. I wore my mother bought me an outfit. You had to be outfitted, of course, with a certain amount of clothes. You had to have a sea chest, you had to have this little uniform, you know, that you wore. And I, of course, dressed up in my uniform before I joined the ship, and I was what would you call it, all the kids in the neighborhood were envying me walking around with this little officer's uniform, and that made me feel very good. But finally I joined the ship, as I said, in Hamburg. I sailed from Leith, Scotland, across the North Sea, which was my first experience of being away from home and my first experience at sea. And I've got to confess that I was very sick going across that North Sea. A lot of the ideas of seamen were sort of deflated that night, you know, by the sea statements, because it was a very rough passage, and the North Sea can be very rough. But I got over that very fast.
Were you forced to go into the rigging the first?
No, when I joined the ship, she wasn't quite ready for going to sea. And of course I practiced going up and down the mast, you know, in the harbour, you know. So that by the time I did leave port, I was familiar with being up on the mast, up on the yards, and I helped the crew there bend sails and do whatever a boy could do, you know. What could he do? So they expected him to do everything that was possible to help. There was no such a thing. And I got all the romantic notions of being a little officer knocked out of my head when I got ordered around. So we left the Hamburger with a general cargo for Sydney, Australia. And we went outside into the North Sea, and for some reason, no doubt because of the headwinds going through the English Channel, we went away around the north of Scotland, you know, up around the Orkney Islands, up at Fair Island, the Faroe Islands, up the Faroe Islands, around. And while it was June, it was very, very cold up there, you know. And of course, here was my first experience of being at sea, and my first experience of what it meant to be a sailor and the work that we had to do. I remember we had to hoist on decks and and do the clean up after leaving port. There's a lot of work to be done to clean up the ship and all that sort of thing. And I was handed a bucket and a swab and one thing, sand and canvas, as they called it, as a piece of canvas, and we cleaned the brightwork, the woodwork with polishing the woodwork with this sand, rubbing with canvas, and it was pretty miserable and very, very cold. So then later on we of course we got into the Atlantic and started south, and we soon we picked up on the northeast trades, and we soon were in good weather.
And how did that affect your?
But I felt very much better, when the weather was good, and there was 4 other apprentices on the ship, so we were quite a happy-go-lucky bunch of kids. They were all much a little older than I was, but all much more sophisticated than I was. I was a little Scotch boy with all the Scotch puritanical background, and these kids were a little sophisticated. So there was a lot of things that I learned that I never knew existed before, especially when it come to girls. I was green as the maiden, but I learned very fast,
And how about,
and of course,
how about the crew and the
well,
mates?
the crew were mostly Germans, Germans or Scandinavians, because it was this crew was shipped in Hamburg, and we picked up the sailors that were available there, and they're all a very nice bunch. This was also my first experience of being amongst foreigners, but I don't know what it was in my background. I learned very fast to get along with them and to like them. There was no racial bias, so that was unusual, because we were just approaching the First World War was in the offing, and the great armament race was on between the Germans and the British, and the war was imminent, so that we were being taught, not deliberately, but the villains were the Germans. But I found them, I had none of those notions about them. I got along very, very well with everybody aboard the ship.
What year was this?
This was in 1908.
Right.
1908, yes.
So you're proceeding down the...
Yeah, and so down the Atlantic, and we had good weather all the way, practically all the way. Once we had little minor blows up north, but once we got down into the warm areas and the warm belt, around the equator and all that, it was wonderful to be aboard a sailing ship there. Of course, we learned right away there was an awful lot of work to be done, and we were never allowed to be idle aboard the ship. There was always someone finding something for you to do. And the apprentices probably were the most exploited and the hardest working of all, because we didn't live in the forecastle, which was away forward. We lived in what they call the half deck, which is right in the break of the poop, and you're right underneath the eye of the officers all the time. So if there was anything to be done, it was the boy, it was the apprentice that had to do it. He was the handiest. Anything that had to be, any of the ropes to be hauled, the ratlins to be tied up, the buntlines and clewlines to be tied, we were called upon to do it. And we worked harder. The ordinary seamen who come had a much better time than we had. And this was the first experience I got that I discovered long before I got to Australia, that this apprenticeship was a bit of a racket. It was a racket exploiting young boys for no wages, because we didn't get wages. I got wages, but not the other boy. I got them in the form, whatever the apprentice, the indentures cost, which I think on our ship was about 25 guineas. You received that in the form of wages in the 4 years that you served. You got £2 the first year, £4 the second year, 8 and 12. I think it was something like that. Now I got that money, but the other boys whose parents had paid the money, they all also got the same, you see. So they only got back their own money during the 4 years of servitude.
Yeah.
Now where the ordinary seaman up on the forecastle was probably getting about, or maybe $10 a month, £2 a month, something like that, maybe £1. But he was at least being paid for what he was doing. And he didn't work any harder, or do as I said before, he even worked less than we did.
Did the four
So
of you?
this struck me as being some form of slavery, you know, and I never knocked all the romantic notions of apprenticeship out of my.
Did the four of you or five of you just accept it though?
Oh, they all. There was no questioning of it. There was no questioning of it. I don't know whether there was something in me. I don't know. I came from a long line of dissenters in Scotland. You know, that my forefathers had always been mixed up in some kind of a dissent, from the Covenanters on to the Chartist movement and the Labour Party movement, the early origins of the Labour Party. So I must have imbibed some of this in my conversations with the parents, or at least hearing them talk about it. But I was right then a little bit of a radical, you know. But the other boys didn't seem to mind it. No, I never heard any of them complain about it. But so we, as I said, we got to once we got down around, when we got around Cape Hope, we got into what they call the Roaring Forties. Then we began to get bad weather, you know. So a fair wind all the way, but blowing like hell all the way from there to Australia, you know, making about 300 and some odd miles a day, you know, with most all sails set. So sometimes even then we had to take them in because it was too dangerous to carry all sails, even with a fair wind.
And what was a typical day like in the rolling forties?
Stormy there's one thing, as I said before, they always kept you busy aboard the ship. There was always something to do. You were never allowed to rest, as it were, during your watches. And the watches were divided into 4 hours on and 4 hours off. And that meant that you worked 12 hours a day in good weather, you know. In bad weather, if something had to be done, and in bad weather, almost everything that had to be done needed all hands, you know, because all those ships in those times were pretty well undermanned. They all went to sea with probably half of the crew that should be normal to the running of a ship. So you couldn't do a big job like the hoisting of a lower topsail, taking in a lot of sail. It couldn't be done by just the one crew. It had to be done by everyone pitching in, all hands on deck. So in this bad weather area, there was none of this scrubbing and painting and so on and so forth that they found for you, chipping of rust and all that sort of thing that they found for you to do. You stood by, what they call it was always stand by, you know, you were always standing by for whatever may happen, you know, in bad weather. You couldn't work on deck anyway because the decks were most of the time awash for the seas breaking over, you know, and you couldn't do it. So you either stayed under the outside of the forecastle, you know, or in the break of the poop, waiting for something to happen and being there on deck on call.
What was this like for a young?
Well, it was very. It was probably one of the best memories that I have of that period was the mere fact of sailing itself, you know, with the wind howling and the seas breaking off and the gulls and the albatrosses sailing around you, you know, and all that sort of a thing. It was very, very inspiring, very inspiring.
And the work
well,
of changing sails was...
yeah, you did it. You knew you had to do it. You know, it had to be done. And you groused, because sailors were always grousing, no matter what it was. A sailor is a notorious grouser. He's always complaining. But he did it, you know. He did what had to be done and gave every ounce that was in him to do it. You know, there was no lagging back. There was very, very few laggers amongst the crew, because it was a so-called community effort. You know, they all knew that everything was needed if they were going to carry on. No one could afford to lay back because his own well-being was on the line. You know, so everybody did it without complaint.
Were all the officers generally well liked?
Pardon?
Were the officers well
Well,
liked?
as I know, in my experience of the officers, they were well liked. British ships were notoriously what they call hungry but easy. You know, that was a slogan. A line chaser, as they call them, was a good ship. It was a hungry ship, and otherwise they starved you to death. But it was easy. They didn't drive you. The majority of the officers were decent human beings who were much in the same boat as you were, you know, I mean, being overworked for little wages, you know, especially at this time that I'm talking about, because the sailing ships were a dying breed, as it were, you know, they were on their last legs. There were nowhere for them to go but off. And they were sailed on a shoestring, you know. They couldn't make much money or make any money out of it. In fact, it was sometimes said it was more profitable to lose a ship than to save it. And hundreds of ships, or lots of ships, let's exaggerate, but many, many ships were sent out to sea, and I'm quite well sure that the thought behind it and part of the owners, I hope that's the last we see of her, you know, that kind of an attitude, you know. Because the rigging was poor, the food was terrible, and very, very little, and the wages were low. The work was hard and the wages low, as the shanty says.
Yeah. So you were sailing down running along the 40s.
Down what they call the roaring 40s. I forget, you know, this is a long, long time ago.
Yeah.
But I don't think it didn't take us very long. Once we got round the Cape of Good Hope, which we happened to get a glimpse of. You know, we got a glimpse of the coastline as we went around.
What was it like?
Well, like any, after you've been out at sea for a few weeks and I've seen nothing.
This was the first time you'd seen
that? Yeah, this was probably, no, I think we saw one of the islands, Ascension Island or Centolina, I forget. We saw one of the islands off the coast of Africa. I think it was Ascension, you know. But this we saw Cape of Good Hope. And there's always quite a feeling, you know, when you see land, and it evokes a sort of a spirit or a mood or whatever you call it, a sort of a wonder what it's like over there, you know, that kind of an attitude. The same idea when you meet a ship, when you see a ship go by, you never, and she'll be so far away that you can't signal or anything, you know. But again, there's this feeling, you know, that there's human beings somewhere beside us over there on that ship, you know. And we keep our eyes on it as long as and when she departs over the horizon, you know, there's a sort of a feeling of loss again, you know, that you're on your own.
Right. And so when you were 15, you were out of sight of land for all these weeks.
Yeah, all those weeks, yeah. And we got, as I said, it was bad, what would be called bad weather, you know, but it was good sailing weather, you know, it was bad weather.
So.
And very, very, to a youngster like me, we had to take the wheel. That was one of the first things that we were taught, to take a turn at the wheel, you know. And we did it, the wheel was bigger than I was, you know. Of course, in bad weather, you know, like that, they usually put two people at the wheel, you know, to hold it down. But when you're sailing with a fair wind behind you, you know, and these enormous rolling seas are following you, and you take a dip down, and this big rolling sea is rushing at you, you know, and the towers, it looks like it's about 100 feet behind you, and it's going to just come right over the top of you. It took a little while to get over that feeling, you know. And somehow it just goes right under your stern and misses you. So there has been experiences that I've read about and heard about from some of these old sailors, you know, of how these big sails would poop sometimes, you know. They'd come right down on the ship, and many ships have been lost from that because they clear the deck of everything, you know. Wash everybody ashore, you know. But it was awe-inspiring. Didn't make me afraid so much, you know. But it was something that inspired you, you know. Yeah. And you felt, oh, Jesus, I'm a part of this. Yeah. But I'll never, I say, that's one of the experiences aboard ship that I'll never forget, is running Easton down, you know, running Easton, because it was day after day. I forget how many days it took, you know, maybe a couple of weeks or whatever it was, I forget, you know. And then we got around the bight of Australia and then up the coast, up into Sydney. That was 96 days.
And that was your destination, Sydney.
That was Sydney, Australia.
What?
And that again was a wonderful experience to a youngster, you know. Here you are on the foreign line. Now you're going to be in Australia, you know. And the pilot picks you up outside the Sydney Heads, and the tugboat comes out and takes you in, you know, and we anchored just inside the Heads, you know, there in this beautiful bay of Sydney. And we got out, all the kids got up, way up in the Royal Yard there, you know, to gaze around, and you try to evoke what it'll be like, you know, when you saw these tugboats and there's ferry boats going past you, you know. So then they finally come to take you into port to discharge. So there we were in Australia. Well, Australia was a beautiful, well, at least Sydney was a very interesting town, you know, very interesting. And there was quite a few sailing ships in there. And of course we all got ashore and we dressed up in our little uniform. Well, the only man that didn't dress in a uniform was the apprentice, who was a second-year boy. He was what do you call it, a junior? Or what's a junior? First you have
freshman,
whatever
sophomore.
comes freshman.
Sophomore.
I was a freshman. So all the freshmen put on their uniforms, you know, to parade up George Street in Sydney. But not the older boy. He went ashore with his. Well, that was Australia was the last time I wore a uniform. No more of that. Meanwhile, I'd been growing fast. You know, I'd left. I wasn't 5 foot tall. You know, but the 3 months out at sea, I don't know. Wasn't the food they gave me, but must have been pulling on the ropes. It stretched me everywhere I went. You know, but I grew about 3 or 4 inches. It seemed, you know, because my little uniform was too small for me. So I gave up the uniform and never wore it again. Yeah.
What was it like being in the port?
Well, it was very, you know, like all ports. They're very, like all foreign countries. I don't know whether you've still got that feeling that when you travel, you know, that you're in a foreign country. There's something in the atmosphere, the air, that is different, and it's stimulating. You know, that's stimulating. Of course, we're losing that now, because no matter where you go today, you're running up against the same kind of a life that you've left behind you. You know, all the ethnic or values have been more or less destroyed. It's a Coca-Cola period now. But that was funny in Sydney, and one thing that sticks out in my mind, we used to go down the main street in Sydney, I think, was a street called George Street, and we used to parade on George Street, the boys, you know. And George Street was a notorious street for. There was a lot of prostitutes on that street, you know, like they are everywhere, I suppose. I suppose there were prostitutes, you know. I never forget 2 girls were coming along, and I was walking by with my mate, you know, and one of them come over and she picked my cheek and says, "Oh, what a nice little boy." You know, my nice little boy, you know. It was funny. Red-cheeked. I'll never forget that, man. I didn't even know what kind of a girl she was, but she was just having a good time with me. What a nice little boy.
And you were embarrassed by the...
Yeah, I was embarrassed by that, you know. So then we, after we discharged cargo there, it took quite a while. Well, I guess we must have been in Sydney about a month, you know. And then we went up in ballast up to Newcastle, which is about 75 miles from Sydney. And there we loaded coal, which is a coal country. That's why it's got its name. Coal to Newcastle, see? And we loaded coal for South America, for Chile in South America. And that was that was a lot of sailing ships. They're all going through the same motions as we were.
Were you expected to load the coal?
No, the coal. They had modern facilities for loading coal in Newcastle, say, or any highly industrialized port. All had modern facilities, so they loaded the coal. Didn't take them very long. Once we waited for a time to get to what they call the tip, where they tip the coal into, the tips they call them. And once we got there, it didn't take more than 2 or 3 days to load. We loaded about 4,000 ton of coal. We were bound for a little town called Tippecanoe in Chile, which is in the northern part of Chile, above Iquique. I don't know if these names mean much to you, but
no,
south of Cali, or almost in the border of Peru, a little bit of a town. So we took this 4,000 ton of coal. Now that was a pretty nice voyage there from Australia, Sydney too, because it was all in a fair weather area, not south. You didn't have to go down way in the roaring 40s or 50s. You sailed in about the 30 latitudes, across the Pacific, all the way across the Pacific to.
And that's fair winds then.
Mostly fair winds, mostly fair winds, despite the prevailing. Yeah, that's all fair winds. That's right, all fair winds. We were sailing east. Was it west? That's right.
No.
East.
East, right.
That's right.
Right.
All fair winds, yeah.
And you could sail the four-masted bark with sails up on all.
That's right.
All the sails up. On all
we had one or two bad blows there. We had one bad.
Do you remember? Do you remember?
Yeah, one of them was very bad. I remember for the fact that she was taking aboard a lot of water in this thing, and for some reason or other I had got down on deck. I was on the deck and making my way along, and one big comber come right over the top of me. And before I could get out of its way, it got me and knocked me flying on the deck. It's the one that didn't take me over, but what it did do, we had spars, spare spars, which are lashed along the bulwarks, and in case of dismasting or anything like that. And somehow or other, and there were wooden spars, and when this big sea came aboard, it raised them a half an inch or so, and I slid underneath one with my leg, got in, and then when the water washed away, of course the spar came down on top of my leg, and I was held there. It's a wonder I wasn't drowned, because it held me under the water, but they got me out without, I was all right. All I had was a badly bruised leg, but that scared the hell out of me. Yeah, that was my first mishap. But I forgot to tell you about one mishap. I wasn't a daring kid somehow. I wasn't daring. As I told you, the other apprentices were all a year or two older than I, and all more sophisticated boys. They'd all gone to what they call in England public schools, and they'd engaged in sports and all sort of. And but I wasn't that type, I was the intellectual type. But anyway, we had one of the jobs of the boys the apprentices was, after setting sail, they send a boy aloft to what is the term now? Can you shut off for me?
Oh,
you can bleep it anyway, yeah. But overhaul the buntlines. To overhaul the buntlines, you know what buntlines are?
No.
Buntlines are on a square sail, they're the ropes that pull up the sail. There's one on each side. There's a clew line and there's a bunt line. I think, as far as I remember. And you overhaul when you pull them up to reeve the sail. So, but when you set sail, you know, then the crew goes up and ties the sails up, you know. But when you're unfurling sail, you know, and after the sail is set, you have to send a boy up and you overhaul the buntline. The ropes that do this. These ropes go down just like a pulley, like when you're raising a window blind, you know, that type of window blind. But you have to give them enough leeway so that so that they wouldn't be tight and chafe the sail. You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
See, they roll when you're pulling them. They roll the sail up in a bundle.
Mm-hmm.
See, now but when you overhaul them, you have to overhaul them and give them a little slack.
Mm-hmm.
So that they have about a foot of slack, and you tie them with a little piece of string or twine, say. And then when you're going to take in the sail, a good tug on that buntline will break the string,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can get the sail in, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So after setting sail, it was the job of the apprentices to go aloft and do this. You had to go up on the yard that's now set and pull up the slack and let a little bite of slack hang and tie it there. That was his job. Now we were doing that once. I'd been aloft, but I'd never been as far as a Royal Yard. This was just about a month after I'd left Hamburg. And I was just getting familiar with going aloft.
Mm-hmm.
And we were sent up to do it, and two of us went up there. I don't know why. Maybe just to learn what's to be done, you know. And this boy and I went together. And we overhauled the buntline, you know. And I overhauled the to'gansels, which was down below.
Mm-hmm.
And he went up to overhaul the royal buntline. Now, on a sailing ship, the rigging doesn't go all the way to the masthead, you know, to the royal masthead. The last few feet after the sail is set, you have to climb up the backstay, shinny up to the top. And this boy, and I'd never done that. I didn't want to do it either at that particular time. So I said, oh, forget it. So I'm going to make it. He was going to make it, you know, and he started shinnying up this thing, and I started to go down. Well, on the way down, he passed me. He fell. He fell from the top of the yard, top of the royal mast. And lucky, he fell right into the inside belly of a sail, the mainsail. And he shot down just like a slide, you know, like a chute. And he landed with his shoulders on the deck. And I thought he was killed. But he wasn't. He made it.
Oh,
he was burned to death. You know, he got burned all that because as he fell, he bumped into the rigging, you know, and he got shaved by the rigging, you know, and he was burned.
And you just saw
he was marked for life.
You just saw him for a second go by.
Yeah, he just saw a second. I just had reached I had just got down on deck, you know, when he almost landed at my feet. And he came down in the inside of the sail, shot over the sheet, and landed on deck.
And you were right there.
He didn't. If the sheet hadn't been there, he went in the water.
Oh.
But he went in. It's just like, you know, like a fireman's net. That's it. Been jumping into.
Gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah, and he was, of course, he was marked for life because he was all burned with. But he wasn't. Nothing broken. Oh. And he was out on deck within a couple of weeks, and he was up aloft just the same. It didn't do anything for him.
That's 150 feet or so, isn't it? 100.
Yeah, something like that, as far as I remember. Yeah, as far as I remember, it must be about 150 feet up.
Oh, that's amazing. That's incredible. That was in the Atlantic, probably.
That was in the Atlantic. Yeah, that was before we crossed the line. It was in good weather. It was in. Yeah. We'd had a little bit of a blow the night before, you know, where they'd taken in the royals and the to'gansels. But he was all right. He was a tough egg.
He must have been. He must have been. So you crossed the Pacific.
Yeah, we crossed the Pacific to Waikiki. We got there in 56 days. So you can imagine that it was good weather. I mean, it was good sailing
Right,
weather.
right.
And we arrived there on just about New Year's. You know, just about New Year's when we got there. And you lay out there, and this was just a little bit of a town with a few shacks on it, you know, that you went there to unload this coal. And there we had to unload the coal by hand. 4,000 ton of it, which had to be dug out of the hold and put in 100-pound sacks and hoisted out of the hold and then dumped onto a lighter, which took it ashore. We didn't lay in a dock. There was no docks. You rode anchor about a mile from the shore.
In the ocean or in the
In the ocean. No,
in the open sea?
Yeah, in the open sea. Yeah, in open
Oh.
sea. No breakwater, no nothing. Yeah, just there. So, and what a terrific job that was. I don't know. It must have taken us about 2 months to do it, because we didn't even. This ship, I shows how hungry they were. This ship didn't even what they call a donkey engine. That was just a little steam engine, you know, a steam contraption for hoisting the anchor or doing any heavy work. Everything had to be done by hand, and all that coal was hove out of the hold by winch, hand winches. I think there were 6 men to the winch. The rest were down in the hole shoveling coal. They didn't put us boys down in the apprentices didn't go in the hole. They took their turn on the winches.
And how many hours a day would you work?
12 hours.
12 hours.
From 6 to 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, 6 to 6.
And would you ever get to go ashore or not?
Never. All the time we were there, we never got. I never got ashore. The men got 1 day off in the 2 months or 3 months that we were there.
How'd they use the 1 day they got?
Well, that was a terrible thing. Most of them, of course, what would happen when men turn loose like that after 5 months on a ship? So they went berserk, you know. They headed for either for the whorehouses or the saloons, one or the other, you know. And they had to be rounded up by the police and brought back on board ship. Most of them. So our ship was all right. For some reason, we didn't lose any men, but as a rule, these men disappeared. You never saw them anymore, you know, because they probably got shanghaied for a cruise for another ship who had done the same thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They replaced them. They got drunk, and there was other ships there waiting for cruise because this had happened. You know, so these fellas drunks were picked up and they were shanghaied aboard another ship. But we were very lucky. I think on that cruise, I don't think we lost more than 2 men. Which was it?
And those were lost on shore, deserting.
Yeah, they weren't.
Or just leaving.
Many weren't even deserters.
Right.
They were shanghaied. You know what I mean? Shanghai. You know what Shanghai means? To be picked up by boarding house people and sold to some other captain and dumped on another ship.
I see. Right.
Yeah.
And was there much of this going on?
Oh yes, this is a common occurrence to be shanghaied, especially in ports like that. So they also was very prominent in Australia. It was prominent in any big port. Seamen, that's how they got the crews, mostly by Shanghai. A sailor would come ashore with a few dollars, you know, and what do you do? He'd make for the first boarding house, you know, where seamen lived. And he'd give the boarding house keeper his wages and stay there as long as the money left, you know. Of course, he didn't have to stay very long because the boarding master took good care of that, you know. It didn't take long. And then the boarding master would supply the other captains with the ship. And without questioning the sailor as to whether he wanted to go.
Yeah.
Usually get him drunk, you know, and he'd wake up and find himself out at sea aboard another ship. Just as the British Navy used to get the crew by the same manner, the press gang. You've heard about the press gang,
right.
yeah.
Did you ever lose any men through casualties?
No,
On this voyage?
no. We were we had very uneventful trips. You know, did rather well on the few trips that I made around the Horn.
Mhm.
We didn't lose anyone. Even the one we nearly lost, he survived.
Yeah, that
But
sounds
we
that's
did
amazing.
very well. We had a very good we had a good ship. So very fair. Had she been well found, well manned, and well rigged, it would be a pleasure to be aboard her, because the captain was a very good seaman, a very quiet, taciturn type of a man, a God-fearing Baptist from Wales. Many of the captains in those days were Welshmen, you know, that were in sailing ships, the old timers, you know. And the first voyage he had his wife with us, on a honeymoon. She
Really?
was a young woman about 25 or so, and which wasn't good, because seamen don't like women aboard ship. They call them Jonahs. You know what a Jonah is?
Uh-huh.
Jonah is one that brings bad luck to a ship, you know. She was a very quiet, inoffensive little woman, you know. So.
Would she ever talk to any of you? Or?
Yes, she would talk to the boys, you know, particularly the boys. They weren't very sociable. We never got invited for lunch or anything with them, or, you know, none of that kind of a thing, you know. So, which sometimes happened aboard with the boys, you know, with the apprentices. If the captain had his wife aboard, she would invite them maybe once a week for tea or something like that, you know. But this one never invited us.
Yeah.
I think she was too scared. I don't know what. She was too scared of us. Yeah.
So,
But we had a good crew and a good. No, all the sailors got along very well. There was very seldom any fighting amongst them, you know.
was there any fighting or was there any any fighting or discontent?
No, among the crew, very seldom. Or sometimes someone getting an argument and calls names, but there was never any actual fisticuffs, if you know what I mean. No bullying or anything like that, you know.
That's good.
And they were all different nationalities, you know. But nationality didn't mean anything aboard the sailing ship, you know. You were a seaman. A seaman was especially a sailing ship seaman, was the true internationalist. He had no country.
Mm-hmm.
If he sailed in a British ship, he was a British seaman. If he sailed in an American ship, he was an American seaman, you know. Mm-hmm. No matter where he came from, whether he came from Finland or Sweden or Scotland, he was an American seaman.
Mm-hmm. How about
and he could go ashore where he felt like, and never had to produce any evidences of who he was or what he was. Anywhere in the world he could walk ashore.
With no passports?
No passports. No passports.
Huh. Oh, that's fascinating.
Huh?
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's great.
No passports. The passport system among seamen didn't come in till the First World War, during the First World War.
Well, what did your ship do after it unloaded the coal?
Well, after unloading the coal, we then loaded saltpeter.
Uh-huh. And this is at the town in Chile?
This is the town in Chile. We loaded we first took half of it in one port, and then we went down to another port and took the other half of it there. That all came aboard by lighter already in sacks, you know.
And all this time, do you have to anchor out in the ocean?
All out in the
ocean. In the open ocean. Did you have any storms?
No, you'd have a bit of a blow, you know, but never anything bad. We never had anything bad, no.
So you could hold your anchor?
Yeah, you could hold anchor. I imagine if it ever got really bad, they'd up anchor and sail out to sea to get away from it, you know.
Right.
But we never. It was ideal sort of. Well, you know, it's in about the 20 latitudes, you know, warm and beautiful water, beautiful salt water, you know. So it never rained, you know. The mountains are right behind, you know. Nothing grows there. It's completely barren. And it's mostly, the saltpeter mines are mostly owned by Germans and British, you know, British capital and German capital. The Germans had a big saltpeter mines, and they also had their own ships. The Germans had their own ships, which they sailed back and forth, you know, carrying their own cargoes and everything like that. And they were very well found. They were very, very well found, and they had good crews because everything was in a hurry with them, you know. they were stockpiling ammunition because most of this stuff went for ammunition.
Right. And you had to load the saltpeter.
Yeah, you loaded the saltpeter, and then when you're loaded, then you're off again around the Horn, back home. So.
Okay. And so, this was when you started back, and we're heading for Cape Horn then.
Yeah, we're going down south around the Horn. Yeah, we're going around the Horn, which is a fair weather passage, because you've got the wind behind you this time. So we got around pretty easily. It was blowing like hell, which it does always, at least 11 months out of the year around the Horn. Blow, 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 And it's quite interesting as you go around there and you see some of the poor bugger, as he used to say, coming around the opposite direction. You see what he's taking, because he's heading right into it,
Yeah.
It's a very dangerous area.
Yeah.
Because there isn't too much room to maneuver off the Horn, because you go far south, you run into the ice. If you come north, you run into the Horn itself. So yeah. It's funny, one of the most inspiring sights I ever saw at sea was we were going around the Horn and coming this way, going west around the Horn. And there was a big German 5-masted bark, the Preußen, the biggest, it was a 5-masted ship, the Preußen, belonging to the Germans. And she was sailing around there, boy, with everything she had on her, going around. We were battling around there under lower topsails. And she looked enormous because she was the biggest sailing ship in the world, at that time. She was lost later.
And she was coming,
She was going, we were coming around the Horn in this direction. I'm a voyage ahead of you, and just talking about what had happened when I saw this German ship going around.
With everything set.
Everything set, because they had wonderful rigging and they had big crews, and well found, good food, and they were profitable. These ships were, because they were hauling their own cargo, and the idea was to get back and forth as often as they could.
Yeah, right.
They weren't worrying about losing the ship around the Horn. They weren't going. They were going to get home.
So on your first voyage, you had rough weather, but no mishaps around the Horn at all.
No mishaps.
You didn't see the Horn as you went by.
Yeah, we saw the Horn.
You saw it.
Yeah, we saw the Horn. We got a glimpse of it. Yeah.
What did it look like?
Which is very unusual. Well, it's very foreboding, especially when you look at it and you think of all the ships that have been lost around the Horn, So it's ominous. Is that the word, ominous, when you go by? You don't see much of it. What do you see? And spray and fog, and mist, but it's there. We got around it all right.
And it was heavy weather all the way.
Heavy weather, heavy weather going round. It was heavy weather, but it was fair weather. So it's no problem, as long as you get the sail in off of her, so if you don't carry too much sail, then she can take, Because if you have too much sail and you get too much wind, then you're going to lose your sail. That's all you're going to lose, or lose your mast.
Did you lose any sails?
We had a very conservative skipper. This fellow, he was a good seaman. He wasn't spectacular, but he always was a jump ahead of the weather, He didn't waste any time. He'd get the sail off of her. He knew what he was sailing with, He knew his rigging wasn't much good, his sails weren't much good, and his men weren't much good. Okay? So he'd get the sail off before anything really happened. So we were never caught with our pants down, So he was a good seaman.
So you never lost any sails?
Never lost. Well, we did. We lost sail, but that is that's tautology almost. You lose sails, on the board ship.
Oh, how do you?
But it didn't mean much. You
Uh-huh.
know, you just take them down and send other ones up. That's all.
Uh-huh.
Oh yeah, we lost sail. Incidentally, I'll show you some in a storm down here. We lost sails. I got a couple of pictures down here.
Oh, great! Yeah, that'd be
Want
good.
to show you?
Be good to see.
So,
Yeah. So this was the first, and then you're going back across the Atlantic.
yeah, I got
on
Atlantic
the last lap
yeah,
of your first
last
first
lap,
voyage.
Yeah, and then we sailed up the Atlantic. We got caught in a very bad storm off the coast of Brazil, off the what they call a Pampel, I think is, you know, coming down from the Pampas. You know, one of these storms that come from the land. You know, an electrical storm. That was a beautiful sight. We were being hit by electric all around. The mass, you know, it was all like carrying electricity. You know, sparks flying in all directions. You know, very scary, very scary.
Yeah.
But we didn't do us any harm. You know,
And
it scared the hell out of
you
me.
could actually see the
Yeah,
masts
oh
and
yeah,
spars lit
You
up.
see the lit up. You know, all it was an electrical storm with wind. You know.
Uh-huh.
And it would hit the masts, the yards, and on, like daylight almost, like a Christmas tree.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah, very nice. So we got safely home, and that was it.
What was it like getting back to your?
Well,
to
of course, then back again. Of course, now you're a veteran. You've been around the horn, you know. You're a veteran. You know your way around. You know every rope on board the ship, and you've learned never to spit to windward. You know, things like that. So we got home, and then I went home. Then the ship went to Glasgow, I think. Where was it? I forget. Glasgow, then unload, and you're free for a couple of months. You know, while she's discharging cargo. And then when she's about ready to go to sea, to send for you, and you go back and about a week ahead, you know, and start out all over again.
Same voyage.
Same routine,
plan.
yeah.
Same
Yeah.
plan.
More or less the same routine.
Uh-huh.
Now, the last voyage I made was from last voyage on that ship was from Glasgow to Vancouver, British Columbia, around the Horn.
How many voyages had you taken?
3 voyages.
So this was the third voyage?
Yeah, about a third, yeah.
Uh-huh.
The others were the same, but this was going around the Horn and into the teeth of the gale, you know, and that's the one that scares the hell out of you.
What was that? What was that
To get
like from the
around the
beginning? From the beginning of the.
Well, it was almost, you know, till you get down there, it's the same as any other, you know,
Uh-huh.
the same with wind and storm. And you get down there, and then you prepare for it, you know, you have everything the best sail, you change your sails. You take, you know, usually in trips like that, they use 2 sets of sails, you know, they use the fair weather sets, which are secondary sails, you know, ones that have been used are not too strong. They use them in quiet latitudes, you know.
Mhm.
But then when you're getting down south and getting ready to go around the Horn, about after the 30s, between the 30s and the 40s, you bend on the winter sails, you know, the hard weather sails, and you're all ready for going around. Hoping to get around easily. We did very well going around the Horn that time. We had lots of wind and lots of water, but as I say, he was a good skipper. And he never took chances. And we saw land there. The first land we saw there was way down and right in Staten Island. You have Staten Island off the coast of South America.
Right.
And we went through the Straits of Le Maire, which is between the island and the mainland, which very few ships go through that. We saw that land well, you know. Most ships avoid that.
Yeah.
You know, they go around by the Falkland Islands, you know. But we went in between the two, between the Staten Island.
Why did the captain decide to go?
Well, it
between
might
the
have
two?
been favourable for
For the
him.
winds,
You know,
yeah.
it might have been favourable winds, and he took a chance and he went through there. I imagine that was why.
Were the skies overcast most of the time? Was
Well, in
it
the
stormy
south,
skies?
yeah, oh yeah. Well, of course you got sunshine, don't you? You got lots of wind with sun too. You know, sun and wind went well together.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't always. There's lots of wind with lots of sun too.
Yeah. Yeah. What time of year was this that you were going around?
This going around the Horn into it was the fall. What would be equivalent of the fall?
Here.
About
So-
October, somewhere. No, it would be spring, south. It'd be in the spring.
So it was just the end of the winter.
Yeah,
Beginning of spring.
yeah. The beginning of the end of the winter. That's right.
Uh-huh.
Winter down there is July and August, somewhere around that time. And this was about October, November, somewhere.
What do you remember of those days?
Of
Just the days that you were rounding against the wind.
Well, I remember a lot of hard work,
Yeah.
you know, because you're going about all the time, practically on deck all the time, you know. You have no, as I told you before, you haven't got too much room to maneuver down there, you know.
Uh-huh.
So it was tack ship all the time, into tack ship. You're a sailor, you know that.
Right.
Tacking ship in a small area is concerned.
Yeah.
And you couldn't, you didn't have much room because you had the land on one side and the ice on the other side. Especially that time of the year, there was more ice around there in the warmer part of the year, you know.
Yeah.
So you only had a few miles to maneuver in. And if you were trying to do that in the face of a gale of wind, you lose more sometimes than you gain, you know, because you don't, and especially with a short-handed crew, you don't get the sails around fast enough, you know. You'll drift away.
How long would it take to tack ship?
Well, a couple of hours or so.
A couple of hours
Yeah,
to
it
tack
takes,
ship.
as far as I remember, it takes quite a while, you know.
Wow.
It takes quite
That's
a while.
just pulling one sail over
That's right,
after
getting
another.
around, to get it all set and, you know, to make the complete maneuver.
Mhm. And that
Don't
was
hold me to that now. My memory is not too good. How
No.
long? It might have looked like a couple hours.
Yeah.
May have been faster than you thought, you know.
Yeah.
But don't forget, you're dealing with bad weather, you know. And when you're doing this, you're taking water aboard. You know, you're taking seas dashing over you. So you don't just you're not as mobile as you would like to be.
So what's it? So on deck, you're pretty much soaked the whole time.
Oh yeah, most of the time soaked.
And
Most of the time.
can you get dry?
No, it was very hard to get dry. Well, nothing to get dry on. You got into soak. You got into wet clothes again. You know.
And the temperatures were
Huh?
the temperatures were cold.
Yeah, the temperature will never freeze, and they'll never frost, never freezing. But they're just the verge of freezing. They might have been freezing, but the water wasn't freezing. You know, salt water. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
It might have been freezing. I know I used to cry when I come down from aloft. It was so painful. Getting your hands warm again. I used to piss in them to keep them warm.
Really?
Yeah.
When you came down from the rigging.
So, yeah, I come down from up above.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'd spend as much as an hour up there, an hour, 2 hours trying to get a sail in.
And with just
You're
with
trying
nothing
to
on your
take in a
hand.
big topsail.
Yeah.
Take an hour to 2 hours sometimes with all hands trying to get that sail in.
And you'd start to get it in, and it
Yeah,
would go away.
blow away from you.
Yeah, and then you have to
You
start
know,
again.
blow out of your hands.
Huh.
Don't forget, you have only 2 hands, you know, and one's supposed to hang on, but
Yeah.
you don't do much hanging on. You hang on with your belly button, you know, by laying over the sail, your weight.
Uh-huh.
Your own weight is the only thing that glues you to the yard.
Yeah. Do you remember any particular time trying to take in sail?
Huh?
Do you remember trying to take in sail any particular time?
Oh yes. Oh,
Any-
yes. Oh, yes.
Any one time in particular?
Well, nothing that would happen. We always got them in.
Uh-huh.
No matter how long it took us, we got them in. But usually it used to take all hands to get them in. This is why this so 4 on and 4 off sometimes would stretch into 12 on and 2 off, you know, something like that.
Uh-huh.
Because you would work, suppose you're on deck. You're on deck. And it's all hands on deck, you know, so when it's your turn to go below, you have to stay within the new group that comes on, you know. Or the all hands on deck, maybe the order as the other watch comes on. So you stay with them. So you may stay another 4 hours, you know.
Mm. So, yeah.
So you may work 12 hours before you get below again.
Mm.
You can't switch the watches
Mhm.
as you see fit. The watches go on just the same, no matter what whose turn it is. So you may, in that 12 hours, you may only get 2 hours sleep in that 12.
Mm-hmm. And there's no way to get warm.
No
Yeah.
ways to get warm. No,
Uh-huh.
no ways to get warm. The forecastle had in a little bogie, what they called a bogie, which was a little pot boiling stove, you know,
Uh-huh.
where you give you a little bit of heat. But the most heat that you got in a forecastle was body heat from the rest of the men.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You begin to sweat, not sweat, but you come in off of the deck and you're all wet and cold, you know. There's a little bit more heat in the forecastle than there is outside. You begin to sweat, you know, the steam begins to rise from you.
Huh. Yeah.
Now the seamen used to fix up on the forecastles. They used to get ready for the going around the hall, and by the end they would enclose all the bunks inside canvas, so they were sleeping in like a coffin with a lid down. you know what I mean? They'd put a canvas curtain in front of the bunk, you know,
Yeah.
and crawl in behind this curtain to hold the heat in, you know, to hold the heat in, so their own body heat would heat up this box that they were sleeping. They were sleeping in a box.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Now, were you a seaman by now, or were you still
No,
as an apprentice?
You're an apprentice until you graduate, if you want to use that term. Till your 4 years is up, you're
I see. Right.
you're a graduate. Yeah.
So you're still sleeping.
Yeah, I was still in the half deck.
Half deck.
I was
right.
still in the half deck. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So, there was 5 of us in the half deck.
Uh-huh. But you were expected by now to be up taking down sail. And
Oh, you
everything.
were doing everything. You were as good a seaman as there was anyone aboard the ship. You knew your way around. Just as good as any. And you were as good as what you wanted to be. I mean, as what you had started to learn, you know. And all the kids all tried to be the best possible kind of a seaman there was. They took a great pride in mastering what had to be done.
Uh-huh.
And they didn't envy, but they worshipped the old seaman who was a good seaman. You know what I mean? Because they weren't all of the same pattern, but there was seamen aboard these ships who had never been in anything else but a sailing ship for 40 years or on there. And all the kids admired these kind of seamen, you know. He's a good man, you know, that's kind of a thing. And they learned as much as they could from these men who were willing to teach them. And they were always there willing, because you had the whole crew that was always breathing down your neck to show you what to do.
Uh-huh. Do you remember it?
Yeah, and they didn't hesitate to tell you when you were wrong or anything, you know, and to get it. And you had to do things right.
Do you remember any of the old seamen in particular?
Oh, there was one fellow there that I met there. He was a big Scotsman whom we all admired. He was quite a character. He had been an apprentice as of his own, you know. And he had, he'd never got he'd become a drunk, you know, an alcoholic on shore. I don't know what happened to him, but he was a big man, you know. He was a big 6'2" man and a wonderful seaman. When he was sober, you know, he came aboard drunk. But he knew his business terrifically, and all the kids admired him because first he was a big man, you know. He'd been, according to legend, I don't know much truth, he'd been a champion. He'd also spent a bit of time in the British Army, and he'd been a champion boxer of the British Army heavyweights, you know. He'd everything going for him that a kid would admire, you know. And he was very nice with apprentices, and he was an apprentice. He wasn't an ordinary sailor, if you know what I mean. He came from a very good family and a wealthy family. folks had lots of money. He was the black sheep of the family, you know. But all the kids admired him, and he was always very willing to teach them what they. He would even teach the captain, a kind of a guy. But, everyone's very fond of him.
Yeah.
You know.
Do you remember anything you learned from him?
Huh?
Do you remember
no,
anything?
Just the ordinary, whatever. The way to do this and the way to do that, and the way, especially we learned the way not to do it. That's what we learned more than anything, the way not to do it, you know. But it's quite Big Mac, we used to call him, Big Mac. Yeah.
And so you delivered the ship to coming around Cape Horn?
Yeah, we got around the Horn, and not too hard to get around it either.
How many days was that?
Huh?
How many days just roughly would it be, going around the Horn that way?
To get around the Horn itself? Right. Wow. Oh, I don't know how you can't set time to how to, if the weather is fair, you go around and like anything else, there's nothing to stop you. But if the weather is very, very bad and you can't make it, you may spend a month trying to get around that, to make 100 miles to get around the Horn. A month. Many a shippers never made it. Gave up in disgust and sailed the other way, you know. Went east all the way around the Cape of Good Hope and over to across the Pacific, right up to wherever they're going, whether it's San Francisco or anywhere on the Pacific coast, because they couldn't make it. Usually these ships got in a little trouble, you know what I mean to say. They might have been smashed, they'd lost all their sails more or less, you know, and all that sort of, and gave up. But you could get around if the wind favored you, you know. In other words, if you had no wind, you know, then you could get around. It was all up to what the weather conditions were. But any ship that could get around in a couple of weeks considered themselves very lucky. You know, if they could make it in a couple of weeks.
So you got around. Did you see the Horn that time going around or not?
No, I didn't. I don't think we saw that. No, I don't. We didn't see the Horn going around that time. No, we didn't see it. Saw it coming the other way. Because you could take more chances coming the other way. You know what I mean? You had fair wind behind you. Yeah, and you could take more chances. You could sail in closer, you know, without. But you can't take chances when you have to tack back and forth. When you have to beat your way around the Horn. Coming home, you don't beat your way around the Horn. You just come around. It's simple.